Now, I'd love to introduce you to our next speaker, Kathy Martinez, President and CEO of Disability Rights Advocates. Kathy Martinez, an internationally recognized disability rights leader, joined Disability Rights Advocates as President CEO in March 2021, after having spent 6 years as SVP, Head of Disability and Accessibility Strategy for Wells Fargo. While with Wells Fargo, Kathy helped to weave disability into the overall diversity agenda to expand the bank's capabilities and programs to better serve both employees and customers with disabilities. She is currently serving on the board of the American Association of People with Disabilities and has served on the boards of the National Council on Disabilities, the U.S. Institute of Peace, and the State Department's Advisory Committee on Disabilities and Foreign Policy. A graduate of San Francisco State University, Martinez speaks and publishes on a wide array of topics related to disability employment, including the emergence of disability as an essential component of workplace diversity and inclusion, and the importance of expectation and ensuring youth with disabilities grow up with an assumption of work, a topic on which Martinez, who herself was born blind, offers compelling and personal perspective. She will be joined in conversation by Power to Fly's Lena Godoy. I'll pass the mic to you two. Thank you so much. Take it away.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mariela, and well, nice to have you all here today. So let me kick off with some questions, Kathy. And let's start by having you tell us a bit more about yourself, where you're based, and just give us an insight into your career journey.
Well, I'm pretty old, so it's actually quite a long journey, and thank you so much, Lena. Great to be here with you. So I was born blind quite a while back. I guess I can't say old, I have to say chronologically advanced, but I was born blind, and my family, of course, I was raised in a very large Latinx family. My parents are originally from New Mexico, but I was primarily raised in California. One of the things I can say is that, you know, my parents, I was very lucky to have the parents that I did, because they really treated me like the rest of the family. And I also, after I was born, 2 years later, they had another kid, and my sister was also blind. So Peggy and I are the two middle kids out of 6. I was very lucky. My parents were very insistent that Peggy and I both go to mainstream school. And I say I'm lucky because very often segregated schools deprive disabled people of their cultures. Definitely, you know, you get taken away from your family, so you don't tend to grow up with your family. So I feel like I was very lucky. I went to mainstream school starting when I was in kindergarten. I learned how to read Braille when I started reading Braille kind of at the same time my peers started reading print. So I had the experience of learning how to read Braille at the same time that they read print. So, you know, the books were the same. The school district put the information in Braille, so I was able to participate. As a teenager, I got very involved in the farm workers movement. It was the United Farm Workers, kind of a youth group, because I grew up where there was a lot of strawberry fields and orange groves. Then I kind of went through my, you know, I am woman phase, where I got involved in the women's movement and and then I found the disability rights movement, and I'd never known that there was such a thing as disability pride. So I got involved in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s in the disability rights movement. And my focus has all, for a very long time, been on economic justice. I felt like, you know, as people with disabilities, the expectations of us are so low that we're often given jobs at the very bottom of the ladder, and we're often paid sub-minimum wage. So my passion through, you know, the last 40 years has really been around economic justice, how do we get people with disabilities in jobs? How do we get promoted? How do we change not only the physical accessibility, but also in the age of technology, digital accessibility, and then ultimately culture. How does work culture, how is it inclusive for people with disabilities? And I've had numerous jobs. I ran a nonprofit for quite a while. Then I was an assistant secretary for the Department of Labor. I worked for Wells Fargo for 6 years as their lead for disability and accessibility strategy. And now I'm at Disability Rights Advocates, leading a litigation nonprofit disability rights law firm. So here I am.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing all that story. It's really moving and really interesting to hear how you felt well, let's say happy and proud to have the family you had and the opportunities you had with them. And we would like to hear more about your goals. And we also would love to know how DRA is ensuring that people with disabilities have access to opportunities and have a fair chance to succeed in their careers and live with dignity. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so Disability Rights Advocates is a nonprofit high-impact litigation law firm, basically. We don't only focus on careers, on jobs, but what we do is, there's many ways to gain civil rights. There's many ways to move the needle. And one way is through litigation. That is one of the tools in the toolkit of civil rights. And usually, that's kind of the end option that people choose to litigate. But Disability Rights Advocates has been around for 28 years. It really was one of the first disability law firms to start kind of putting the meat on the bones of the Americans with Disabilities Act, meaning that the act was passed in 1990. And it was, a kind of a skeleton of what disability rights should look like. And so there was, many entities that did not want to change how they did business. So Disability Rights Advocates became one of the leading litigation law firms in the country. Our focus really is on a variety of access issues, which includes voting rights, access to education, access to healthcare, access to emergency preparedness, access to just kind of getting around in your city. How are the sidewalks built so that people in wheelchairs don't have to ride in the street? So we litigate in a lot of different areas. Employment is one of them, but we have a very broad spectrum of areas where we've made a big difference for people with disabilities.
All right, thank you very much for sharing all of that as well. It's really important, my brother, he was in a wheelchair, and I think that unless you have that, you share something with a person who has different needs, it's really difficult for the rest to see that there's a need there. Yeah, it's something that happened to me, and I had that experience as well. I was close to him and going everywhere with him just to help him leverage that what was missing out there. Now, people with disabilities and also people from the BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus community often endure discriminatory behavior in their daily lives and are often not legally aware of their rights. Could you tell us more about the role DRA is playing to prevent this and to hold the government and other big organizations accountable?
Sure. I think it's important to understand, first of all, that disability, no matter what type of disability, is a natural part of the human condition. And throughout the world, people are recognizing that, if we have high expectations of people with disabilities, and if society itself is more accessible, then everybody benefits. The United Nations passed drafted a convention on the rights of people with disabilities, and many countries have signed on. Unfortunately, the United States, the president, the Senate has not agreed to sign on to the convention, but many countries have. And the United States has laws that are pretty strong. I'm not saying they're perfect, but the Americans with Disabilities Act is a piece of civil rights legislation that has really changed society. So if you look at, in the US, if you look at things like our buildings, our street corners, the physical aspects of society have been changed. So, you go into most big cities and you see ramps, right? Who uses the ramps? Everybody uses them. They were built for people in wheelchairs, but you see, women with strollers, people on skateboards, people on bikes, people carrying luggage, everybody uses those ramps. So the DRA, Disability Rights Advocates, as well as the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, are both instruments. We're a law firm, but I think it's important, given that this is an international conference, to talk about work that other countries are doing. People are, throughout the world, are realizing that people with disabilities have so much to offer, and it's a real waste on so many levels to have people who want to work and are capable of working not work. As you can see, economic justice has been my passion. So I'm very tied into how other countries are getting people with disabilities to work. There's a lot of really good projects in India since it passed its Disability Rights Act. Brazil has some good projects. All over the world, people with disabilities are, the attitude is changing, right? It used to be, it was viewed as a charity issue. And now it's being viewed as a human rights issue, meaning that people with disabilities, first of all, anybody can join this community, right? It's scary to think, but people can join our community at any time. And the great thing is, when there are laws and when there are, when we have physical access or digital access, if you do join our community, if you break your leg or if something happens to your vision, then you're still able to participate in society. I know that was kind of a long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine, and thanks for aligning us with such detailed information. And asking a bit more about that, what are some of your recent precedent-setting legal works that have had significant impact for the disabled and underprivileged? Can you tell us more about that as well?
Yeah, we've won some good cases. We won a voting rights case in North Carolina, where people with disabilities, didn't have access to absentee ballots. We've won some cases in New York and in Chicago that allow people with kids with disabilities to be integrated into the education system rather than being segregated. We won a case in New York giving access to teachers who teach in the New York City School District, giving access to restrooms, if you can believe that. So we've done some wonderful cases that do impact people of color. We worked with the Immigration Customs Department to be able to help folks that had COVID, either, because it was super crowded. So we said that the congregate setting was harming people. We were able to work with the Immigration Customs and Enforcement to, to either get people removed from the detention centers and or have people more spread out. So our work, we work in lots of different areas, and we've been successful because disability in general impacts poor communities more, and communities of color more. I would say that poverty is a consequence of disability, and disability can be a consequence of poverty. So poverty and disability are very, very much connected.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you 100%. And adding on to that, what are some other challenging initiatives that DRA is currently advocating to bring about a lasting change? For instance, can you highlight a few specific instances where your initiatives broke the norm, made the big organizations or governments bend, and brought about a positive change in the way things are done?
Well, I think, the cases that we win, our cases are high impact cases. So they impact hundreds of thousands of people. We don't charge our clients. And the disability rights is a marathon, not a sprint. So we're always trying to get better. We're looking at, as people tend to age into disability. So for example, the work that we've done in California and the work that we're doing in Baltimore around accessible sidewalks is going to really impact, it's really going to impact how people get out. Can they, if they're in a wheelchair, can they access the sidewalks? Can they walk to the store or roll to the store? For blind people, how are we impacting? How are we developing our bike lanes so that it's not an obstacle? So at Disability Rights Advocates, again, we think about physical access. We think about digital access. Are websites accessible? Can somebody order groceries? Can somebody pay their bill online? These are all things that we think about. And then in terms of culture, when in the workplace, how do we discuss disability? How do we talk about non-evident disabilities like mental disabilities, or in many cases, the Latino or Latinx community, there's a high rate of diabetes, and that's a non-evident disability, but diabetes can spawn secondary issues like neuropathy or blindness. And this is something, when we're developing a corporate culture, we have to think about how does this enter into our workspace, especially now where people are kind of, reclaiming their work lives. I think disability has to be woven in as a part of every diversity agenda. It cannot be special. We can't put it on a special shelf. It's got to be part of the equation in every work culture.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. One question before wrapping up. We still have a few minutes, but what message would you like to convey, to share with anyone who's listening to this talk, or anyone who will be listening to it in the future? Do you have anything that you would like to share? Like, I don't know, maybe just tell us a bit about your day-to-day. How is it for you? What are your feelings, and any other message that you would like to share with the community?
Well, as you know, I'm blind. I was born blind. I guess my message is that, that the United Nations and many, many countries have taken a stand about disability, just like they have about women or children. And we have to remember that disability is a natural part of the human condition. And the more we develop and design our societies to be accessible, both physically, digitally, and culturally, the more it will benefit everybody. Because as we know, folks are aging like me, and people will age into their disabilities. And what an amazing world if society made itself more accessible to sort of meet the person with the disability in the middle, right? So my message is disability is a natural part of the human condition. Society is moving toward making itself more accessible, and we will all benefit from that accessibility and that change.
Yeah, completely. I agree a lot with what you're saying. And it's really important that we are all aware of this message that you're saying. And I haven't asked, and just to wrap up, we still have some minutes, but just in case you want to provide more information for everyone who's tuned in, can you tell us a bit more about how we can connect with you, support you in your endeavors?
Sure. If anybody's interested in being in touch, I am at K Martinez at dralegal.org. And I think, it's really important to acknowledge the connection between, race and disability, or disability and poverty, or disability and work. Again, I think the most important thing we can do is to weave disability into all aspects of life. And again, I focus on the workplace, but voting, education, transportation, accessible sidewalks, emergency preparedness, all of these areas, many people, disability rights advocates, are working to make more accessible for the world, not just here in the US, but everywhere.
That's really interesting. Can you tell us more about how you're advocating for this and making it like throughout the world, like expanding to, or working maybe in collaboration with other countries, other offices? Can you tell us a bit more about that as well?
Well, right now I am not working internationally, but I did for many years. And some of the most important things that I think that I was impacted by was, first of all, as a US citizen, it is not my job to tell other people what to do. It is my job to talk about what worked for us and what didn't. And everybody's situation is different. I had the wonderful luck of working both in Namibia and Ethiopia with the disability community there. And I think I learned more from them than they ever got from me. But to learn that, after in the case of Namibia, after the war in South Africa, there was a lot of people with disabilities, right? War creates disabled people. In Ethiopia, I was very lucky to work with an amazing group of folks, and also in Central and South America and in Mexico. So, I think the lesson for me is that listening is a better thing to do than providing advice, given that our contexts are so different. But I realized that we have much more in common. The goal of bringing people with disability into society and making society more accessible, so that people with disabilities will be successful and will be able to contribute. I would say there's a lot happening, internationally around disability. Unfortunately, I'm not so much of a part of it. I did work with the International Labor Organization through the UN, and that was an amazing experience. Thinking about getting people with disabilities, have them, give them the ability to have an income and improve their their situation.
Yeah, definitely. I want to thank you a lot for all that you shared. And we have Mariela here. We were just wrapping up. Mariela, I'm not sure if you want to add anything. Kathy was sharing all all of her experience and messages she wanted to share with the community. Really interesting talk. So pass it on to you, Mariela.
Thank you both. What an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Lena. And thank you, Kathy. I really love the active listening reminder. I think we can all practice that a little more in our private lives and also in the workplace. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.